Hello and welcome to CS 490R. I'm Brother Slade. I think most of you have had a class from me before, and I hope this class will be really fun. We're going to learn a lot of technology that people use in the industry, and I'm really excited, so let's get started. So hopefully most of you have found our home page here. If you're on any assignment, if you want to get to it, just click on this link or the home link right here. So in there you'll see this introduction. And don't skip over these pages. I will usually link to them in your quizzes as you watch videos. But each module will have a page that you can read. The important thing here will be the official syllabus. So if we click here, it brings us to the syllabus page. And we'll look at some of the goals. Now you can read through the official syllabus right here. Down below are just some of the highlights. So one thing that we want to learn in this class is Git. Very important. You might have used it in another class from me, but we're really going to learn how to use Git in this class. Most jobs that you'll get, just expect that you know Git. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is to learn what an API is. Another word for this might be a web service. We're also going to talk about service-oriented architecture, and we'll talk about those today in this lecture. We're going to learn about RESTful routing that deals with an API, virtualization and containers as a way to kind of unify your development environment and easily deploy applications. That means launching your web application live. And we're going to learn about back-end and front-end technologies, and most importantly is this right here. We're going to learn how to learn on your own. Most of the material in this class will be used searching for tutorials and information on the web. So I'm not going to have a textbook to follow. I'm not going to create a lot of videos to walk you through how to do everything. You're going to have to find those yourself. Make sure you're up to the task. By now, I expect that if you have an idea in your head, that you can develop a program that implements that idea. This is a 400 level class, 490R, one of the last classes you should take, although I know some of you might take classes again in fall semester. But this is considered like the last class, and by now you should just be able to program. If you have an idea in your head, you should be able to program it up, debug it, and without getting much help from others. Maybe occasionally someone can give you an idea on how to implement something or help you with a difficult bug. But for the most part, you should be self-sufficient in programming. And this class right here, now that you are self-sufficient in programming, you're going to learn how to learn on your own, how to find resources that will teach you new technologies. Because after you graduate, you're not going to have a professor that's going to teach you how to do everything. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. So that's the most important goal of this class. This class will mostly focus on projects. This is a project-based class. So you'll come up with a project that you will build, and that will be worth 70% of your grade. Now, watching any lectures that I produce and taking the quizzes that go with each module will be worth 10% of your grade. And then the final exam will be worth 20% of your grade, and that will be given on Canvas using Proctorial. So the late policy, just let me cover the rest of the highlights of the syllabus. The late policy, you'll have 2 late days. That allows you to turn in a project 1 class period late. So class period means if the project is due on a Wednesday, the next class period would be Friday, so you can turn it in on Friday for full credit using a late day. So if it's due on Friday, then you have until Monday to turn it in using a late day. And if it's due on Monday, you have until Wednesday to turn it in using a late day. Now, if you run out of late days, it's a 10% deduction for the assignment. Now, this is really important because the projects will build off of each other. You can only turn in an assignment 1 class period late. After that, it's a 0. So that's to encourage you to make sure you get your projects done on time and then give you a little bit of leeway if something happens. What I don't want happening is one project being 2 or 3 days late, and that affects your ability to do the next project, which affects the ability to do the next project. So hopefully this will encourage you to either turn it in on time, and if you run into any problems, either take a 10% deduction a late day, and then you get it in pretty soon so you can start the next project. Now, academic honesty, you shouldn't be helping a lot in this class. If someone's helping you program your assignments, if they're sitting by you, giving you more than 5-10 minutes of help at a time, then you're probably cheating in this class. Like I say, you should be self-sufficient in programming before you take this class. And if you cheat, you'll get an automatic F. Now, getting help. So there are no tutors for this class, so the only way to get help really is to ask me, the professor. And before you ask me, you will have to email me specific questions. So if you send me an email saying, hey, can we meet? Can we get on Microsoft Teams and talk about something? I will probably just respond and say, what are your specific questions? So you need to, the questions should be detailed enough to show me that you spent some time researching your problem before giving up and coming to ask me. So make sure that instead of just emailing me, hey, can I meet sometime, make sure you're including specific questions. Now, this is a warning right here for anybody taking this class. You should be able to complete a 301 project, or most of the 301 projects, on your own. If you cannot, you're not prepared for this class. And I recommend dropping the class and taking it later on when you are more prepared. Especially with this semester being an online class, it's going to be really challenging for you to get help. And once again, I don't have a lot of time to sit with every student and help them with their questions. I need to be fair, so I'm making sure that the help that I give is equal for everyone. And because this is a project-based class and 70% of your grade is based on the projects, I can't help one student for hours and then only give 20 minutes of help to another student. So make sure you really are prepared before you take this class. I want it to be a good experience. If you can't program, if you know that you can't sit down and do a 301 project on your own, then I would highly recommend gaining some more programming experience before you take this class. Now at this time, a lot of the material is still kind of working its way onto the Canvas page, but you can see that if you click on the home page here that you'll have modules. So each module will have one task at the end. The introduction will just kind of introduce you to the class, let you know what you have to do, and introduce the topic of the class, which is web APIs. So then we're going to learn about Git. That'll be about a few days worth. We want to focus on the other material, but you will spend some time learning about Git, which is a source code management solution or a distributed version control system. Then we're going to spend some time working on the back end. We're going to learn HTML for one project, and then we're going to also set up a JavaScript server to serve up our HTML after we've created that page. Next, we're moving into the main topic, which is about web services and APIs. Finally, we're going to learn about virtualization and containers. Then we're going to learn about how to secure our API so that we can make sure that only people that are allowed to access it can. And then we're finally going to make our front end with a single page application. And our front end will also be programmed in JavaScript. So yes, we are learning JavaScript in this class. Your final project, which I'll talk about shortly, will be due on the last day of class, and then we'll have a final exam. So let's talk about this final project. Find information on it on this page. You'll need to come up with a final project to do. You can kind of copy a website that's out there like Facebook or Twitter. You need to have a total of 3 entities, and hopefully you know what an entity is from your database class in 305 and 405. So one entity will be users. Those are people that will come to a website and sign up. And I do recommend that you call them users. Don't try to come up with a different fancy name for them. It's pretty common to call them users unless there's a really good reason not to. And then you need two other entities. So my example, I'm going to implement Slack, which is a communication platform for work groups. And I'm going to have users, just like everyone else in the class, and then we'll have channels and posts. Now you cannot steal my idea. You have to come up with your own idea. So no one's allowed to make a Slack app or an app that's almost exactly like Slack. But you can. There's lots of other things that you can do. If you have an idea already, then use that idea. If you need to build something for work, or a friend wants you to build a website that does something, I'm okay if you build it for this class and use it for work or something else. Okay, and we'll start with the back end first, and then we'll move on to the front end, and hopefully at the end you'll have a really cool working project that will build off of, the assignments will build up to the final project. Now this class is about creating and using APIs, and more specifically web APIs. So what is an API? API stands for Application Programmable Interface. So if you couldn't pick that up from the video, just search it and I'm sure it will be the #1 result. So what is an API? Well, it's basically a list of functions that you can call. For example, if we look here at the Java API, we're doing the HTTP API right here, and we have this package right here, and we have the client, and we can learn about all of the different methods that we can call on an HTTP client class. It also talks about the different fields, so object-oriented programming talks about the different fields, but basically all the information you need to have so that you can implement an HTTP connection in a Java program. So there are APIs in Python. If you want to import a Python library, you can go out on the web, you can search about the library, and then you'll learn about all the different functions and objects or classes that library has, and you'll be able to read everything that you need to know to be able to use that library. Now, when you talk about web APIs, what that means is we're going to call functions on other websites. So let's say that I want to create an app that interacts with Twitter. So Twitter's some other website, they develop it, but they have given this API right here. We could go ahead and browse it, and we can read about all the different methods so that we can get a list of members in a list right here. There's also users, and we can get our friends, and we can search for users, we can see a user, all the different data that's out there on Twitter, we can get it programmatically. That means we can create a mobile application, a desktop application, or even another web application that can call these right here and get the data outside of Twitter and do something unique with it. Now, to show the power of APIs and web APIs, I want to tell a little story. When I was a student at BYU Provo, I had a job working for their intramural activities. So intramurals are where they play sports. People can collect their friends together and they can create a team and they can play sports. And intramurals, they have a lot of participants, over 10,000 participants. So let's say that you got together with a group of your friends and you created a basketball team, where you go to the intramural office and you purchase a schedule that would show you when to show up to play your games. Now, BYU wanted to make sure that all of the students were full-time students because part of their tuition went to fund the intramurals, to pay for the refs and the other equipment that they need. So to play intramurals, you either had to be a full-time student or pay an activity fee. So how they used to do it before I got there was they would have all the team members show up before a game and they'd write their names down on a piece of paper. After they wrote their names down on a piece of paper, someone would take that piece of paper later on into an office and they type in all their ID numbers and make sure they were full-time students. And by the time they got done, tournament time was coming around and they finally realized that one team had an ineligible player, somebody who was either suspended, wasn't a full-time student, didn't pay their activity fee, or they might have been playing on two different teams and now they were supposed to show up and play a game against themselves. So all sorts of problems were happening. So they asked me to develop a application, and this is the interface to the application, where people could create their team and sign up their members online. That way I can make sure that they only signed up for one team on that sport at a time, so I could prevent them from joining two separate teams and make sure that they were full-time students and stuff like that. So I'll show you how I had to do this back in the day when I made this application. Here is my web application where people would go to, they'd see their schedule online, they sign up their players, and it had my database right here that included teams, players, courts, etc. Everything that I needed to store to be able to let people sign up for teams. So over here is BYU's application where people would sign up for their classes, change their phone numbers and their addresses, find out their grades, etc., etc. And they had the database over here that had a lot of sensitive information like people's grades, their social security numbers, phone numbers, addresses, pictures, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we went to BYU and said, hey, we'd like to know if someone's a full-time student or not. Is there a way we can verify that? And the only thing that they decided to do was to give us a login or a connection to that database so I could query the database and find out if they were a full-time student or not. So it doesn't sound too complicated, except the rules on whether someone's a full-time student or not are a little more complicated at BYU Provo than here at BYU Hawaii. Like undergraduate students had to take 12 credits to be a full-time student, whereas graduate students only needed to take 1 credit. And there are different kinds of students that had different levels. If someone was graduating that semester, then they only needed to be taking 1 credit during their last semester. So there was a whole bunch of rules, and for me to figure out if they were a full-time student, I needed to write a whole bunch of code in my application that used this database connection to figure out if they're a full-time student or not. And I'd be querying their database. But besides that, they gave me access to a whole bunch of other stuff like grades, pictures, their addresses, and stuff like that. So hopefully they trust me. You know, they trusted me that I wouldn't do anything bad with that data. But what it does open them up to is getting attacked. If somebody hacks me, my application, they also are able to hack BYU's application. It created a new security hole. And not only that, if they change their database schema over here, I doubt they're going to remember that they gave me a login to their database. So they're going to change their database schema, and suddenly it's going to break my application because their schema changed and my queries that queried their database will no longer work. So a lot of different problems with this, but this is what they had, and that's what I did. So if I were to build this application today, it would be a lot different. So instead of BYU building their website and having it query the database directly, what they built, let me zoom in here so we can have a lot of room in between their database and their website. What they built is a whole bunch of little, what they call microservices or APIs or web services, lots of little different names in this. And these things access the database on their own. right there. And so their application up here would then ask these web services for their data and be able to provide a web interface for the data. So you could sign up for classes. One of these applications might be called Add Class. So you would add a class. When you click on the web page to add a class, you're to call this little web application right here, and it would go to the database, modify the database so you register for the class, and then return a result back so that the web page can say, congratulations, you've added a class. They might have lots of other applications, but one of these might be a full-time student. Is this person a full-time student? And it might be used to build their web application. Well, once they have that, instead of me connecting directly to their database, they would have me just query this little application, and it would send me only the information I need to know. It would only say, yes, they are a full-time student, or no, they're not. And a couple of advantages of that, we've broken this connection right here, so that's secured their database and people's social security numbers, because no longer do they have to worry about my application getting hacked. They can implement their own security in each one of these little applications. Now, another thing, if they change their database schema, they're going to want to update that to make sure their website still works. So now if they change their database schema, it won't break my application, because this guy will keep on working because it's their responsibility to make that function, this full-time student that I'm using, work. Second, all of the rules and stuff on what makes a full-time student, only one person needs to write that. I don't have to write it over here. They probably already had their rules written in their web application, but now they pull that into here and we can share that. And there's other departments all over campus, like the testing center might want to be able to query to see what classes someone is taking. And besides that, let's say that suddenly mobile applications, so this is my version of a phone right here, mobile applications come out and they're really popular, and instead of, they can build a mobile application that can go and query these guys for data. Now these web services, instead of giving HTML out like most web applications will, when you call them, they'll give you some HTML back. But in this case, they give you some computable, readable data, so that you can write a program that can read that data really well. So there's two formats that are popular for that data. One is XML, and you might have learned about that in one of your classes before. And the other one that we're going to use in this class is called JSON. So that's how you say this word. Just pretend like there's an A and it's the name JSON right here. That stands for JavaScript. And JavaScript is the JS, and the O is object notation. So basically, we send some JSON to him. He queries the database and says, yes, that's a full-time student. He runs all his rules, and he'll send some JSON back to me that I can easily read and grab that data. So that's what web services work. And now, as you can tell, a couple of advantages to this is, one, it's more secure. They're not giving me a login to their database that exposes or could expose social security numbers. Two, it's more maintainable, because they don't have to let me know that they're changing their schema when they want to add more features. They'll just make sure their web applications work. Three, we can share this with others. So we can share this with the mobile app team. We can share this with other departments on campus. And the really cool thing, if you develop Facebook or Twitter, you develop it this way, with this web services, and now you can expose. And expose means you open it up so that all these other developers and entrepreneurs that want to create unique applications that use their data, well, you don't have to do anything except for document how to call these functions, and then all these people can have access to the data. Really great. So This is what most enterprise applications do. They build their applications out of these services, and these things are called web services. You also might hear them called as APIs. And another name that you might hear is microservice. So a microservice is one little tiny web application that only has one specific purpose, like the full-time student microservice. So this is what we're going to build in this class. You guys will have your database, and you're going to build a bunch of web services that will interact with that database. Then you're going to implement some security onto those web services. And then the last few weeks of class, we're going to build an HTML page that will interact with that. Now, if you want to take it further and you knew how to make mobile applications, you can go ahead and make your mobile application that would call these same web services. And so most of the hard business logic work will have been created for you, and now you just need to focus on creating interfaces to your data.